Next item would be roll call.
Roger Brock.
Here.
Dean Button.
Here.
Nate Harris. Ann Herbert. Here. William Hutton.
Here.
Juan Morano.
Here.
Kim White. Here. Thomas White.
Here.
And Janet Vaness.
Here.
We have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8, right? 3 present, 1 absent.
Next item on the agenda would be the approval of the April 17th, 2017 meeting minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes for the meeting of April 17,
Do we have a second?
2017.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And the second was, I'm sorry,
Ann.
Ann? Okay, thank you.
And any old business?
There's no old business.
Okay. And, ooh, pardon me. Due to a conflict of interest that I would have with the petitioner, I'm going to step down from the president's seat, and Mr. Hutton is going to take over.
Thank you, Mr. White. In looking at the new business, we've been asked by Mr. Poland to combine both petitions that I'm now going to read. CP 1706A, petition of the Hammond Redevelopment Commission to reclassify property at 6600 Indianapolis Boulevard from C2 Shopping Center District to PUD Plan Unit Development District to construct, operate, and maintain a sports complex within the city of Hammond, and to adopt the Hammond Sportsplex PUD District Ordinance. The second petition is CP-17-06B, petition of the Hammond Redevelopment Commission approval of a development plan of PUD in the Hammond Sportsplex PUD. Have all notifications been sent out?
Yes, all the notifications have been, requirements have been met.
Thank you. If the petitioner would like to come forward? Sorry.
Just for the record, because of the combined cases, I'm asking the consultants here, American Construction Point, to start with the presentation of the B portion, and then the A portion, I will make the presentation, and just for the record, that I will be acting as both the presenter and the reviewer, and I don't know if there's any objections from the Plan Commission for me to act in both capacities.
Thank you. Sign in.
Oh, okay.
Name, address, etc. And when you get to the end of that, if you can state your name publicly, certainly appreciate it. And spell it for Karen if she needs it. Okay.
Okay, good evening. My name is Dan McCluskey, Senior Project Architect with American Structure Point. I'm here this evening to present the site plan and architectural elevations and a little bit of description of the project. I believe you guys all have a package of the submittal for your record, but over to the camera. The project overall is a 120-ish thousand square foot sportsplex located just to the south of Carson's department store at the corner of 167th and Indianapolis Boulevard, approximately in the old footprint of the Woodmar Shopping Center. This facility encloses 6 courts of 84-foot-long basketball courts and 2 regulation indoor-size soccer fields. These are different than, outdoor soccer fields inside, but they are a dasherboard type system for soccer. Down the center spine, which you don't really see on the site plan, but there's a center spine that contains restrooms, concessions, offices, community space for the facility. It is fronted to Indianapolis Boulevard, so your main elevations, your main entrance is off Indianapolis Boulevard, but it's situated to the southeast corner, so that visibility from the 167th and Indianapolis Boulevard is foremost. Parking, we are a little over 400 parking spots. I don't remember the number off the top of my head. I apologize for that. It's on the exhibits. John, if you could put those over, it's easier for me to do. Yeah, very good. Almost like we're going from memory. So, again, frontage on Indianapolis Boulevard. There is main parking for the sportsplex along Indianapolis Boulevard. There's a drop-off point coming off the north face of the building that kind of stretches along the eastern facade of the basketball volume of the facility. That kind of gets you closer to the main drop-off, which is sort of right in the center of the building. There's also accessory parking to the northwest corner of the site behind, which is just a grass lot right now behind the Carson's facility. And then it's sort of been in some agreements and discussions with Carson's, approximately 117 spots to the northeast corner of the site that would be sort of dedicated to the Carson's facility proper. There is a sort of a vehicular circulation between the two facilities. There is a 60-foot at minimum separation between the buildings for some code implications, but we have maintained all the appropriate setbacks off of, particularly 167th. Everything else is well off the street edge and off property line edge. So we have bring up that board now. Let's talk about that for a second. The main elevations of the facility, the 2 main venue, call them the venue boxes, the 6-court basketball and the 2-field soccer. The basketball is approximately 32 feet tall, and then the soccer venue is approximately 42 feet tall, based on the indoor clearances required for the sports. Those walls are to be made of a precast concrete structure with a painted, it's a structural precast, so it will be a dual purpose of enclosure, insulated structure, as well as load bearing for the roof structure. The sort of center spine between the 2 colored masses is the main entrance. That will be a single skin metal panel with some openings for daylighting at the main entrance, but also in sort of one of the first rooms you enter into is the community room, community aspect of the facility. Right at the main entrance, there's also a phenolic wood panel. It's designed for exterior use, but it kind of brings some warmth back into the facility from a human scale standpoint versus the rather tall masses and volumes for the two sports venues. Lower right of the elevation board, you'll see a monument sign that we've located on the southeast corner of the project to give a little bit of identity to the project, visibility along Indianapolis Boulevard. There are a couple signage opportunities on the volume of the building itself. One at the main entrance. The exact naming of the facility has not, been finalized, but right now it's being called the Hammond Sportsplex and Community Center. So there's one at the main entrance, and then one on the south or southeast corner of the soccer volume. So we've incorporated, sort of a planning amount of square footage of signage there. Just thinking through some of the aspects I was asked to speak about, directional wayfinding signage. Throughout design, we've been concerned, to pay attention to how people approach the building. Most of the traffic we feel is going to be coming off of 167th in Indianapolis. So people will be taking a left at that intersection and approaching the building. There's either a first opportunity to turn in and park at the on the east side of the building, or there will be directional wayfinding that kind of takes you in a loop around the building and leads you to the drop-off zone that would be for incidental drop-offs of some practices or some tournaments, bus drop-off. All that's incised for sort of that vehicular circulation. So there's wayfinding signage, small. You see on the top of the site plan graphic a sort of a template of what that signage would be from a size and city logo, facility logo standpoint with some directional arrows. On the southbound on Indianapolis Boulevard, you get to the right in, right out pork chop there at the north edge of the site. There would also be a little bit of directional signage to lead you back. Again, early on I said that just north of the Carsons, there's some dedicated parking for Carsons itself. And then there's sort of a separate, sort of vehicular spine to lead you from that private drive around, to get you back into the northwest parking, but also to lead you directly to the front door of the facility. Site lighting, I believe it's in your package from a site lighting standpoint. We've distributed the light. It'll be a little over 30-foot tall pole, LED. So the light concentration and directional aspect of the LED lighting really lends itself to a nice, even, distributed light. We are at a little over a foot candle at the property line, so I think that meets lighting restrictions within the area. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can help explain.
The retail facility.
Yes, certainly. Future expansion, which isn't in the first package, but we have planned out for, trying to remember how many thousand square feet. About 16,000.
16.5.
16.5, yeah, that's right. 16.5 square feet just off the main entrance, sort of to the southeast corner of the building. Right now it's just greenscape, but we have planned in that use to accommodate for the landscape percentage across the site. So we're above the 10% for landscape coverage of the site. So, but that would be a comparable material to complement the materials on the rest of the facility.
Okay. Landscaping?
Landscaping, we've got islands stretched across the parking lot. Also pedestrian pathways linked throughout those islands to kind of get you from the outer reaches of the parking lot into the main entrance. Mainly grasses and trees and things like that.
And the percentages?
I believe we're at 10.2% or something like that.
It's in that ballpark, yeah.
Yeah, right around in there.
There's still an outstanding question on the colors of the building? Right.
So initially the design concept was, this is basketball and soccer, so we started to draw off of the colors of those sports. We are still in a little bit of back and forth discussion with the steering committee to develop a color palette for that. So, you know, we could be drawing off of some of the blues of Lake Michigan or some other sort of pattern, but, you know, the general feel is that it'll be a painted precast design, so.
And as far as the placement, that is expected or not expected to change?
No, I think those are the, we wanted to make a contrast between the two sides, whether it's those colors or not. But if it's all blue, it'll still sort of have those kind of tonal patterns. On the soccer side, we've got sort of shades of green, but it could be shades of blue, and kind of take those same concepts and play it on the other side. But from a general standpoint, yes, those are sort of the extents of color on the building.
Okay, and where are you at in the utilities, the drainage, the detention, and all that?
Mm-hmm. Detention, I mean, utility stormwater, we're working with existing utilities or existing storm sewer to tie in, so we don't foresee any additional detainage required. Water connections, we're making off of 167th. It's sort of the shortest path. All of the utility, you know, sort of building utilities will be coming in the sort of the west center side of the building. That's where the main building services room is located. So sort of that back, what's the existing alley that was behind Woodmar is going to be rebuilt along with this project, and a lot of those utility connections will tie in there.
So as far as there's still, the final design of that is still pending?
No, I think from an exact placement standpoint, I think we're pretty well set.
But as far as sizes of them and
Yes.
pipes and stuff,
Yeah, I believe so.
that you're set?
Mm-hmm. I believe so.
And then, are you, you're at this stage, and I know at this point we're going for approvals, but as far as the whole schedule of the project, you still have construction drawings to do, and then the bid process, design commission, and all those things.
That's correct. That's correct. We're targeting for sort of a first bid package out to bid at the end of this month, which would include site clearing and site utilities, site grading. The precast package, that's a long lead item, so we want to try to get that out on the streets as fast as we can. And also concrete package, which would be foundations for the precast package, so to try to get those in as early as possible. Then subsequent packages would be, you know, sort of the balance of the building from a MEP standpoint, all the rest of the architectural, wall construction, steel packages, things like that. So that would become middle of summer or so.
Okay. And then, you know, I had passed on to you the comments from the city engineer, some questions he had, and I have not received a response back that those have been addressed.
I think we're in the process of addressing them. Our understanding was that those weren't to be completed by now, you know, at this point, but we are certainly working on them.
Okay, so that still is a pending thing.
Commissioners, any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I would have a few questions, if I may. It sounded to me like, I'm the city engineer, it sounded to me like you're considering, or the project is considering a construction manager style of
That's correct.
of delivery, so it's not a conventional design bid build. You're bidding them out in packages as...
That's correct, and it's still a design bid build situation. It's the city is then, you know, hiring a construction manager agent to sort of help run those bid packages. Our separate, you know, contract with the city will be for the design services. So, and then we have a component that we assist in the bid period, which is generally RFIs and you know, questions, pre-bid
Shop
meetings.
drawing review, maybe?
Well, shop drawing
Oh, that
review
would be...
is part of the construction administration portion, that the CM would be on board as well. CM would then, you know, after bidding, would, you know, sort of act as main, coordinator of all the sub-packages, because in each bid package, there will be bid categories, like I said, the precast or the concrete or the site work, and I don't believe that person is here tonight, but, you know, there's further clarification to be done on how many times that's broken, each bid package is broken down so that we can get a prime contract with each one of those bid categories. The city would, enter into a separate prime contract with each one of those bid categories.
You gonna say something, Dave?
No, I think that, I mean, we originally were thinking about it one way, but the CM as agent, the way it's been described, is sort of the direction, as of tomorrow night, that's the direction the redevelopment commission is gonna go, I think.
Okay. I'm, no objection, I just was curious about the method of delivery. In terms of traffic, it seems like we're trying to bring all of the traffic in off 167th Street to the site. Is that expected? There's no real entrance from 165th or?
Well, 165th, what we would anticipate is there is the private drive that goes along the west side of the site that then continues on up and connects to 165th, correct? So there's opportunity to either turn in at 165th at that back alley, or continue to 165th in Indianapolis and turn right. And like I said, at that pork chop on the north end of the site, there would be directional wayfinding to get you into the site as well.
That pork chop at the right in, right out?
Correct. That's correct. We made a conscious decision to try to avoid any curb cuts along Indianapolis Boulevard, just from an NDOT, coordination standpoint. And I think we felt, bringing the access points, sort of to the north and to the south, it was going to sort of balance out the traffic flow.
I think it's a great idea. It helps certainly control entry to the site, and then it gives you pretty quick exiting from the site as it's laid out and planned. So I wanted to point that out. I did review the photometrics, and it did look like there was some limited illumination along the west road. So I don't know if you can look at that in terms of brightening the illumination along the west, that west road that runs north to south.
Sure. I know we have some wall packs at building exits, but we'll look at the foot candles. Do you have a recommended, number that you're,
Well, some were really low, some were 0.1, some 0. So it was, I'd say half a foot candle would be okay, but anything that low just seems like it might be a little bit problematic for us.
Okay.
And my last question really is about parking. You mentioned there was some 400 parking spaces.
If I can get closer to the graphic, I can tell
on
you
the site.
exactly.
That's fine. And then was the 130 some spaces for the Carsons, is that included in the 400?
No,
or
that
is
was a
that
separate-
in
that was a
addition to
separate
the
number.
400?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's some close to 600 spaces.
Five something, I believe.
It's like in the 550 range.
Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Mr. Button. Any other comments, commissioners? If hearing none, we'd like,
I'd like to do part A.
go ahead.
Hi. You want me to sign in?
Yes, please, Mr. Poland.
All right. Brian Poland, City Planner. Hi, everybody. All right, I wanted everybody to hear the whole project as what is expected to be constructed. To take a little bit of a step back, there's two things that kind of have to occur before the actual project can go forward. Right now, the property is zoned C2 Shopping Center. Of course, it was a part of the Woodmar Mall that we've all known about for 70 years, whatever it's been. So what the ordinance that you have, I gave you a revised ordinance. It says REV at the top. There is just some technical corrections in it. It's 99.9% what you saw in the packet. So the first portion of the ordinance is actually to do the rezoning. It is, the legal description of the property is Lot 1 of the Woodmar Center addition that was approved, I believe it was in 2010. The two other lots that are north of it are going to still remain C2. The second portion, and it's being rezoned to plan unit development. So the second portion of this ordinance document is then to create the planned unit development district ordinance provisions. The model, or anytime we do a PUD, we usually base it on an existing zoning district. So the core zoning district that we still are basing the PUD on is the C2. So there's analogies and comparabilities here. In looking at the definitions of the C2 district, which is the reason why of the rezoning, the nature of this facility, the definition of it as being a public facility, it didn't meet any of the permitted uses or the conditional uses in the C2 district. So because of it didn't fit nicely, that would have then potentially have triggered variances of uses, developmental variances, and all sorts of other things that make things a little bit more complicated. So the better way to handle it then is to take the property, change it to PUD, and then create a district provisions that are very specific to this development. So in the setbacks, normally in a C2 setback, there's a 50-foot setback. And in most cases, this development, as it's laid out, will meet the 50-foot setback, except for the south side, 167th Street, that will be set at 35 feet. And then establishing the uses in the PUD, we were identified a category uses, literally the community meeting space, the sports facilities, maybe in the future with this retail space, it may be a medical clinic, it may be fitness facilities, things like that that can go in there. Offices, support services, and then because the Carson's building is still within the lot and on the property, we have in the permitted uses the retail, commercial, office, development, or department store, department store. So it's capturing that Carson's will be a permitted use. It can continue to stay. And then we have a series of prohibited uses that we don't want to see in this area: adult entertainment businesses, fireworks, fuel stations, industrial uses, the pawn shop or alternative financial businesses, residential uses, vehicle sales, those types of things that would not really fit with our intended use of the property. In each of the both permitted and the prohibited uses, there is a category of other similar uses of the same general character as the above, as permitted by the Planning Commission. So it's something that in the future, if something comes up that we didn't anticipate at this point, we can look at that, come back to the Planning Commission to say, hey, is this one of the things that are, at least may not be exactly what we have in the list, but it's similar enough, it's compatible, it would fit within the future development. The rest of the provisions go into the standard things of parcel size, building coverage. I've already talked about the setbacks. The permitted buildings, there's two as we talked about. So each of the buildings have their own height restrictions. It was stated that the highest point of the sportsplex was in the 40-foot range. I wrote it as 45. The Carson's building is 3 stories, around probably about 55 feet, but I just set it as 60 feet, so it's capturing that. And then the 120,000 square foot is the footprint of the sportsplex, even though it's like 119 something square feet, but just say 120,000 square feet. The tenant space may not be exactly 16.5, but it's about 16.5, slightly less than that. And then the footprint of the Carson's building is slightly less than the 44,000 feet that's listed in the document. We set the parking requirements. We were able to find some parking language in the ordinance now that fit nicely with this. The building A, the sportsplex, 1 space for 300 gross square feet. The retail building, 1 space per 250 square feet. That's a typical calculation that we would use in a C2 shopping center district. There's also language in here about cross parking between the two. The times that the 2 facilities are open would allow, hopefully there wouldn't be any conflict where both customers could go to the department store as well as go to the sports facility as necessary. Hopefully there's no conflict. And of course ADA parking and all that kind of stuff. Parking design, back when we were looking at the development in 2010, there is an existing variance for the parking spaces to be 9 by 19. That is slightly less in size that we normally require. We normally require 10 by 20s. We also are starting to use 9.5 by 19s, 9 by 19, just because of that previous variance that's already an established fact, and we're keep maintaining that here. One of the things about PUDs when it comes to landscaping, there is a definition in the PUD, in the zoning ordinance about PUDs, that 8% of the total acreage of the PUD has to be set aside as dedicated open space. And that is in addition to the normal 10% requirement of pervious surface within the property. So there is a provision in the current ordinance that says if the Planning Commission does have the option of not requiring that 8% set aside in this PUD if something is available in the adjacent areas. So I've kind of worked with that definition since the nature of this facility is a recreational facility, that we would waive that 8% set aside because of just the definition of what this facility is. And that's listed at the top of page 6, so you understand that. We're still requiring the 10% landscaping elsewhere. That's any of the normal yards you would have. It would be the landscape islands within the parking field. So overall, this particular property is slightly above the 10% requirement. The PD also goes into a description of the dumpster enclosures, and there's a graphic on the drawing on your left, whatever, the one closest to me. And that is where we always state that any dumpster enclosure has to be of a material similar to that of the building itself. And that is what the intention is here. There's language about the architectural character. It's already been discussed that the proposed materials of the building are this painted precast concrete, single skin metal panels. And I wrote down wood panels as accent materials, and I know you had another term for it, but I just said wood panels. That makes it a little bit easier for me in the future. The Carson's building basically is brick. That was very easy to find out. And as far as so you understand where the revisions are in the ordinance, that's where the revision is. I was correcting some of my wording in this section. But their overall character is when you have masonry in both buildings, it is intended to develop a certain level of harmony between the buildings, architecturally if there's masonry, as opposed to another material. In this case, obviously there's differences in the color of the material, or differences in the size of the brick or whatever, concrete panels different from actual traditional brick. But nonetheless, it gives some level of compatibility. It's a little hard to architecturally, from a style standpoint, when you have the Carson's building, basically mid-20th century architecture, how do you try and find something that works with that? But I think what they're trying to achieve is very reasonable and sensitive to what's in the area. We already talked about the lighting and some issues that Mr. Button brought up that we may need to address. And there was a presentation or description of the signage. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that we didn't cause a future problem is really understanding what is the current signage on the Carson's building. And I had them help me develop a good guess of what the size of that signage is, set a maximum cap of how much signage can be on that building, how much signage can be on our sportsplex. These numbers are probably higher than what we're anticipating, but it's designed to be one or more signs as long as the total number of square footage of all those wall signs combined are under that cap. Same thing with any of the freestanding signs, one or more freestanding signs as long as they're under the cap that is stated. And then this public safety sign description that I'm trying to get together or put together from our sign ordinance discussion from a couple of months ago. that any of those traffic control devices, as the wayfinding sign is a term that they use, but any of those things that try and direct people. The wordsmithing part of this is trying to avoid the describing a sign by its content. So that's where there's language in here about any of the signs that are designed for for public surface, public safety and welfare purpose that would address all those things about traffic control, the address on the building, because that's, you have to know where your building is or identify. So those are, even though you're describing the content of it, it's trying to justify that it's a public purpose to have those things. And hopefully that won't cause a conflict with the Supreme Court rulings. Also including here one of the standard things we have in all of our sign language, that if there ever is any signage on windows, that signage does not exceed more than 25% of the window surface. That may not be truly an issue in this case, but I just wanted to make sure that we had that in here. The section 2 of the ordinance is just more of, there's in the Title 30 of the ordinance, there's just a section where we literally have a paragraph descriptions of each PUDs, and that's what the purpose of section 2 is of the ordinance. So, any questions about that?
Hearing no questions, Mr. Poland, thank you very much for that dissertation.
That was brief.
Yes, you were.
Yes, it was. Yes.
Moving along, is there anybody in the audience that would like to express an opinion? If there is, please come forward to the podium, sign in, state your name, address.
My name is David Osoria, and I'm an RGM for the Calumet Taco Bell. And, we came to look at the whole plan about the whole complex. As running a business in Hammond, we feel real highly that this will bring a lot of more customers to not only, the city of Hammond, but the customers in the retail that's around the area. So the owner of our Taco Bells was the one that, encourage us to come and look and see, the plans that they had, questions we might have about the complex, as it will affect everybody in Hammond. It's not just about, it's just certain criteria of people, it's everybody in the whole community. I myself, own a house in Hammond and Hesville, close to where this will be built. I also have, 3 kids that, will be interested in going to go play soccer, going to go play basketball. There's a lot of stuff that, the city of Hammond needs that to, get people involved, instead of going out there, doing crimes, stuff like that. Kids from Morton, I know a lot of people, like, the thing that brought my attention was the whole indoor soccer thing. Me being Hispanic, I know a lot of, young kids, young crowd, 18-year-olds that would rather go to South Chicago and play in their indoor soccer dome. Why not build that in Hammond to get the Hammond kids to go and spend their money here and bring our city, more money into our city to do more greater stuff, than what is not there. Why let our own community people go spend their money another village than to put it back in our own, Hammond city? So, like, to me, I think this is a very, very great idea that everybody in the city has been talking about, and everybody's so anxious to say, okay, when is it gonna start? When is it gonna get built? Not only, we own other stores in Portage, where Portage already has theirs building, they already have a set opening date, and Hammond is just waiting to hear at least a little bit about when is it gonna start. So like I said, if it was for a vote, they automatically will have my vote. You know, because like I said, I want to see stuff like that going in Hammond. It's, you know, me, a father, I want to see a lot of family involvement in the city of Hammond. You know, I've been here in Hammond for 27 years, and it has drastically changed in the years since I was here in high school. You know, so like I said, if it was up to me, yeah, I would definitely go for it.
Thank you very much. We
You're welcome.
appreciate your thoughts and comments.
Very much.
Is there anybody else in the public that would like to say anything? With that being said, we'll close this hearing to public comment. Brian, moving on.
Yeah, I don't know, is there any last minute questions from the planning commission members?
If I may, Mr. President.
Please.
It went kind of fast, so inside there would be how many soccer courts, or fields, rather?
And so on the green side of the building, which is the south side, there are 2 indoor regulation soccer fields. So it's a little bit different than outdoors are 175 by 75, yards size. Indoor regulation soccer fields are 85 feet by 200 feet, and they're enclosed by it's called a dasher board system. It's kind of like hockey. So you got a wall that the ball bounces off of, but that's part of the game.
Okay.
So these are indoor regulation soccer fields. So there'll be 2 of them. 2 of them of that size in the southern part of the facility.
And then there were how many basketball courts?
There are 6 basketball courts. And they're running in a east-west orientation, the main courts. And we'll also have cross-court basketball goals that we won't necessarily be striping those as a full court. That's more for, kiddie ball, kind of small kid stuff. Some of the courts will have raise and lower rims on them, so we can get them down to 8 foot for the smaller children playing. So there's 6 sort of main courts, and then there's on each one of those there's 2 cross courts. So there's 18 different court configurations, and then there's also in the main basketball court orientation there's a volleyball court. So there's 6 sort of east-west running volleyball courts, and then there's also cross-court volleyball, which is still regulation-size volleyball. So there'll be nets, so you can have upward either 12 volleyball courts set up or 6. So that it really opens you up for more tournament play.
Tournament play.
Yep.
And then you mentioned something about office space for, I'm assuming, staff.
Yeah.
Was there any consideration given to concessions? I say you're having a tournament, so there's an area for food and snacks and that kind of thing.
There is.
To be served.
Yep, and that concessions is located sort of right along the center spine. Like I said, the two sporting venues, the soccer and the basketball, are separated by a sort of a main circulation spine. So coming in off Indianapolis Boulevard, the first thing you'll enter under a sort of a main canopy where that wood grain texture kind of panel is. So you enter in, you'll walk forward. Off to your right, you'll have a approximately 2,700 square foot community room, which is sort of like a black box, space that can be used however it wants to be. They can, we'll have presentation screens, flexible seating kind of in there, however it wants to be set up for individual rental to different organizations. It's more of an operational standpoint, but so it's sort of a flex space. A little bit farther in, there's a sort of a secure point, because the nature of these facilities is that it's a ticketed type thing, it's, revenue driven. So there's a ticketed secure zone there. So right adjacent to that, there's a sort of a guest relations window. So you could purchase tickets, but also at that kiosk, you'll be able to purchase tickets to venues.
Okay.
But right off that, there would be general manager for the facility, basketball director, soccer director, volleyball director. So it's sort of a small office space for the management of the building and the management of the sub-sports. A little farther in, you've got the restroom facilities for the facility, and a little farther than that, there's the concessions. And these concessions, it's sort of the the less complex concessions type. This won't have cooking, no grills and fryers. That's a whole nother level of
Yes, it sure is.
concessions kind of thing. So these are kind of walking taco kind of,
Popcorn.
yeah, exactly. Low
Snack.
impact kind of stuff. So, but that's sort of, centered around a central seating space. It's right in the center of the building that is will serve both venues centrally. So you take a right into the basketball venue, or you'll take a left into the soccer venue. So, and then one aspect that I failed to talk about a little earlier. So there's two sets of stairs that come off that center spine that take you to the second level. So there's a mezzanine. It's technically called a mezzanine. It's not a second floor that can overlook. There's a long stretch that can overlook the basketball in the north, and then there's a small sort of a observation deck that can overlook the two soccer fields. So on your second floor, you'll be able to look over top. The soccer has netting all the way around, so the ball can't escape, so you can still look down. But then all the way around the rest of the building, from around the perimeter of the big, venues is a walking trail.
Okay.
So it's, and, somehow luckily it worked out right around the quarter of a mile. So it's a nice measurable distance for patrons to use and know how far they're going. So it's about 9 feet wide, three lanes, directional travel in both ways, and a passing lane for people. So.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Will there be, I'm sorry,
Yep. Go ahead.
will there be shower facilities?
There are not showers in this facility.
Okay.
There are, however, in the public restrooms, what we've developed on previous projects is to utilize the same sort of partition structures that you find in a regular restroom. It's just they're kind of off to the side, because a lot of these tournaments, they have people that come in and want to change clothes right after, but you don't necessarily want to go in where a stall's at. So they're off to the side, so they're just kind of little changing stalls without the water fixture in them. So it's just a little more friendly way to change clothes. So, but those are located on premises, but not a shower per se.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman?
Sir.
Is there any natural light we're planning on coming into the building?
Yeah, so right down the big, the big boxes, we don't want a lot of natural light coming in, especially the basketball, just from a hot spot kind of look, standpoint. But in that center spine, which is kind of located off the two venues, we do have some skylights planned in the roof to kind of, because when you walk down that center corridor, you're really, dealing with a 2-story volume all the way up to the basketball height of roof. So we've located some skylights in there to try to bring some natural light down that center corridor.
Thank you.
Anything else, commissioners? Mr. Poland, would you like to give the staff report?
Yeah, as you see in your packet, there's actually 2 staff reports, and I want to go through them individually and then do the motions associated with each one. So kind of going back to the A portion of the case, this is to reclassify the property from C1 to PUD and then adopt the Hammond Sportsplex PUD district ordinance. And then again, for the record, it's the revised version that was given out to you. Just to kind of run through it real quickly, because the background's already been presented to you. I think everybody is fairly familiar with the location, the zoning of the area. With it's in a commercial district, C4 properties on both sides. Actually, a little industrial property on the east side of the property, east side of Indianapolis Boulevard, and then it is there is a residential neighborhood at the southwest corner of the property. In the analysis portion, the state statute defines 5 criteria that has to be considered for a zoning petition. The comprehensive plan is the first one. It is in Planning District 4, the Woodmar Planning District. At the time that was written, this was proposed to be commercial because that was the existence of the mall, and obviously that's one of the tie-ins for maintaining the concept of the PUD being based on the C2 district. The current conditions, we all know the condition of the property with some of the pavement and being missing and the overgrown nature of it, but it's probably in fair to good condition. The Carson's is relatively well maintained. Desirable use of the property. You know, the intersection of 165th and Indianapolis really has been the centerpiece of our commercial corridors on those two streets. We know the mall has been underutilized. You know, the only thing that remains, as we said, is the Carson's building, and so this is really a great opportunity for redevelopment. We kind of talked about that this venue will be, in a lot of respects, a catalyst to all the adjacent commercial areas. Hopefully, as the patrons come to this location, they will take advantage of the restaurants and the other retail that's within the major corridor. The conservation of the property values, you know, we've always stated new development always does increase the property values of an area. There's this economic spin-off that I just referred to that will definitely help bolster this commercial corridor. Responsible development and growth. We all know that the commercial retail climate is changing nationwide. You know, a lot of people are buying things online, so you know that certainly is an effect on our the buildings that hold commercial activities. And so again, this is another part of that idea that this will help be a stimulus for bringing not just local people, but people from the region into our community and the benefits that are going to be derived from that. Just briefly about the PUD district ordinance, as I explained it all to you, that it's based on the C2 district. The ordinance is written specifically for this development and to maintain the Carson's building. So the first recommendation is the staff recommendation. Staff recommends that the Plan Commission forward the petition for the rezoning and the Hammond Sportsplex PUD district ordinance to the City Council with a favorable recommendation. And then if you agree with this recommendation, the staff requests that this report is adopted by the Plan Commission as preliminary findings of fact.
Thank you, Mr. Poland. Is there a motion on the floor?
Motion to forward the petition for the rezoning and the Hammond Sportsplex PUD district ordinance to the City Council with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote?
Roger Brock,
Yes.
Dean Button,
Yes.
Nate Harris, Ann Herbert,
Yes.
William Hutton,
Yes.
Juan Marrero,
Yes.
Kim White,
Yes.
Thomas White,
Abstain.
Janet Vanez.
Yes.
So we have 7 yeses, 1 abstained, and 1 absent.
Mr. Chairman, I would next move to agree with the staff report and make this report adopted by the Plan Commission as preliminary finding of fact.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Roger Brock,
Yes.
Dean Button,
Yes.
Nate Harris, Ann Herbert,
Yes.
Bill Hutton,
Yes.
Juan Marrero,
Yes.
Kim White,
Yes.
Thomas White,
Abstain.
and Janet Vanez.
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no, 1 absent, 1 abstain.
Mr. Poland?
Okay, going on to Part B of the case, and just so you understand the nature of this report, there's actually, I guess, a Part A and a Part B of the Part B report, if that makes sense to you. Anytime we do PUDs, just from a procedural step, there is the preliminary plan approval, and then there's the final plan approval. At this stage, since we're just sending the rezoning and the PUD district ordinance, you know, it would not be appropriate to do final development plan approval because we haven't had the PUD ordinance approved by the City Council. So in approaching this from a preliminary approval, the appropriate section of the ordinance is 16.5. There's A through H provisions that have to be addressed. Most of this has been discussed in one form or another throughout tonight. I just do want to point out, jump to item E, that is that discussion on the architecture that Carson's is emblematic of the mid-century modern architecture, and that this, trying to get a building designed with appropriate materials that give, or they're compatible with the architectural treatments, and also to give that level of harmony and consistency. Item E, we talked about the open space as well as the waiving of that 8% requirement. That's addressed there. The other items, again, talks about separation of buildings, setbacks, and all of those are compatible. So the recommendation for the preliminary development plan approval is that I'm recommending that this Plan Commission grant preliminary approval of the preliminary development plan subject to the council's approval of the rezoning and the adoption of the PUD's district ordinance. And then again, if the Plan Commission agrees with the recommendation, that the report is adopted as preliminary findings of fact.
Thank you, Mr. Poland. Is there a motion on the floor?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would motion to grant preliminary approval of the preliminary development plan subject to the council's approval of the rezoning and adoption of the PUD district ordinance.
Well stated, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Roger Brock,
Yes.
Dean Button,
Yes.
Nate Harris, Ann Herbert,
Yes.
William Hutton,
Yes.
Juan Marino,
Yes.
Kim White,
Yes.
Thomas White,
Abstain.
Janet Vaness.
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no's, 1 abstain, 1 absent.
Before I give up my seat, can I ask one question? What is the distance between the buildings?
I believe we're a little over 60 feet.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman? I would also request that, or make a motion to accept the staff's report be adopted as a Plan Commission finding of fact.
Thank you, Mr. Button. Second?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Roger Brock,
Yes.
Dean Button,
Yes.
Nate Harris, Ann Herbert,
Yes.
William Hutton, Juan Marino,
Yes.
Kim White,
Yes.
Thomas White,
Abstain.
Janet Vaness.
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no, 1 abstain, 1 absent.
And is there a motion on the floor for the final?
Well, would like to go through the rest of this? Yes.
I apologize.
Okay. So,
I thought we'd streamline.
okay, the final development plan approval is based on section 16.51. Now, as you go through these provisions, the first one is that the final development plan is in compliance with the PUD district ordinance and the applicable provisions of the zoning ordinance. As I stated, the PUD district ordinance has not been adopted at this point in time, so all we can say at this time is it's expected to be compliant with the ordinance. Part B, one of the things that we talked about in the presentation is that there is all these internal sidewalks, because this particular provision talks about that safe and efficient pedestrian access. Those internal sidewalks, the pedestrian ways that are laid out for access through the parking lot. I'm just going to skip ahead, but all the other items are, basically things that we have talked about. Item G, we talked about that a little bit in the presentation. Provisions for sewer, water, and the storm, the parking lot lights are basically compliant. I think there's still an outstanding issue on the final engineering, making sure that the questions of the city engineer has been addressed. And so there's those technical things that are not really completed at this stage and would not be expected to be completed at this stage. So with that being said, that there are some of these technical things that are outstanding, and to be more efficient and not require the petitioner to come back at a subsequent meeting for final development plan approval, staff's recommendation that the Plan Commission give the authority to the staff to grant final development plan approval, subject to this final technical review, subject to the approval of the rezoning and the PUD district ordinance, and then, of course, if you agree with the recommendation, adopt the report as preliminary findings of fact.
Thank you, Mr. Poland.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to give the authority to the staff to grant final development plan approval, subject to the final technical review and approval of the rezoning and PUD district ordinance. I so move.
Thank you, Mr. Button. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote?
Roger Brock,
Yes.
Dean Button,
Yes.
Nate Harris, Ann Herbert,
Yes.
William Hutton,
Yes.
Juan Marrero,
Yes.
Kim White,
Yes.
Thomas White,
Abstain.
and Janet Vanez.
Yes.
We have 7 yeses, 0 noes, 1 abstain, and 1 absent.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would move that we adopt this report by our commission as preliminary finding of fact.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote?
Roger Brock,
Yes.
Dean Button,
Yes.
Nate Harris, Ann Herbert,
Yes.
William Hutton,
Yes.
Juan Marrero,
Yes.
Kim White,
Yes.
Thomas White,
Abstain.
Janet Vanez.
Yes.
And my final question on this is, Councilwoman Vanez, would you agree to be the sponsor on the ordinance to the council?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we restore the formation of the Plan Commission to its regular formation.
Thank you, Mr. Button.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
You did an outstanding job. Outstanding. Top of the line.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton.
You're welcome, Mr. White.
And do we have any correspondence?
No correspondence.
Commissioners' comments? No comments? Staff comments?
There will be, I'm expecting to have a rezoning case coming up for the June meeting. That is June 19th.
19th?
June
Yes.
19th. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Any public comments? Any further public comments? If we have none, would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you and good luck.